Welcome to Rhythms and Strum Patterns number 2. So today we're going to talk about eighth note strum patterns with ties and two chord forms, a major seventh chord form and a minor seventh chord form. And those take place on the A, D, G, and B strings, leaving out both E strings with the right hand. So I'm going to skip those strings. So the challenge is going up and down position-wise with the chord forms. So that's going to create a challenge for you as compared to the first installment of this series on rhythm and strum patterns. So without further ado, let's get you right into the score and we'll check out what we have. So of course the usual fare, we got the chords listed on top of the screen. I'll make this a little bit larger so you can see it. And the whole thing with, like I mentioned before, the chord forms are not too bad. Just the movement between the positions of where the chords are. B major 7 happens starting at the 2nd fret, so the root note's on the A string. And also F sharp major 7, same idea. We're going from the 2nd fret from B major 7 to the F sharp major 7, which is at 9th fret. So it's quite a jump, a 7th fret span. So that's going to be one of the challenges, but the chord form is nice. This one's listed twice for some reason, so we're not going to worry about it. I think I made some changes in the score itself, so maybe I can try to get rid of that later, but we're not going to bother. Anyway, C minor 7, excuse me, is going to be at the 3rd fret, so the root is at 3rd fret. So that's the C minor 7, G minor 7, all the way up at 10th fret. So it's going to be a bigger span to cover in terms of location. So there's no rhyme or reason to the chords I chose other than just kind of presenting a challenge going from position to position. With the strum pattern seemingly probably feeling maybe easier to play. The main thing with the strum pattern is the tie right in here on the end of 2 to the downbeat of 3. And in the tablature you can see there's something happening on the end of 2, but nothing happening right here on downbeat 3. Okay, right hand patterns in there, down, down, up, up, down, up. So usually I like to indicate arrows for down strum, so the arrow would point down. So with this particular software, and I'm sure you've seen this before, they indicate down strums with this like table looking icon thing. So that's your indication of a down strum. So what I'll do is I'll play through the score with the program, not myself playing, and we can talk about some things towards the end. So let's get it back to the beginning. 60 beats per minute, sort of 4 beats of click to start you off, to get your tempo established. Here we go. So a little drawing at the end in terms of the chord progression, how it ends. So there's a couple options for that. If you don't like the way that sounds at the end, you can create your own ending. Maybe a C major 7 chord at the end could be kind of cool. So there's a couple of different options you can play around with, which brings me to the next part of this video. As we go through the chord collection, you can interchange any of these chords you want. So if you want to, play the strum pattern by yourself, which is ideal, take what you have from this particular video and the score and then create your own chord progressions using the strum pattern. Okay, so let me just get out of the score for 1 sec. So you can do something with maybe the C minor 7 going back to the B major 7. So you can do something with that. 7. Maybe go to a C major 7. So what's nice is you can play around with the chord forms. There's only 2. And then again, keep the strum pattern. 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and okay. And you always want to practice the strum pattern just with the right hand to start things out. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and okay. So on beat 3, we can count that particular beat, you know, kind of under our breath, you know, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and kind of whisper it out as you just heard me do. So that works out really well if you want to get into the strum pattern first, which is always ideal, because if you're not thinking about the right hand, it's just going to move. Same thing applies to the chord forms. You can go with, you know, playing the B minor 7, jumping up to F sharp minor 7, I think it was, if my logic is correct. The the chord changes that you get, oh sorry, it's actually C minor 7 to the G minor 7. So you can take both chord forms that you have, the major 7th chord form and the minor 7th chord form, and pair them together. So you can stay with like pairings, like the C minor 7, moving on up to G minor 7. So you're going from 3rd fret for C minor 7 up to 10th fret for G minor 7. Likewise with the major 7th chords, the B major 7 moving up to F sharp major 7. So you can practice those 2 moves, you know, before you even get into the right hand stuff. So it just depends on what you want to start with before you jump into the score. I would recommend isolating different things. Take the right hand, isolate it, left hand, isolate it. And then when your left hand comes into play, take whatever pairs you want to put together. Always work in 2s. It's a nice number to kind of get used to, especially with new chords you're trying to learn. Keep it to chord pairings. It's a really nice, manageable number. 2 is always nice. If you do any more than that, it feels overwhelming. You could take one chord form, just move it around, very unspecific in terms of, you know. So I'm just playing with the shape just for the sake of playing it. And then if you want to, if you feel comfortable enough having isolated your right hand, either first or second as compared to the chords, you can employ, if that's a word, employ, yes it is. You can take the chord form and just play with one type of chord form. Just do the minor 7th chord form, for instance. So I went from C minor 7 to C sharp minor 7 or D flat minor 7, depending. All of the notes that you have in the chords, the root notes, basically the names of the notes that the chords are named after, they're all taking place on the A string. So wherever you move that first finger, whether it's a major 7th chord or a minor 7th chord, whatever fret you land on is going to be the name of that chosen chord, whether it's the minor 7th in the study or the major 7th chord. Okay, so you can either change, I could do B minor 7 into B major 7, back to B minor 7. So that could become your own pair once you're comfortable with moving those 2 kinds of chord qualities, maybe in that little isolated moment, then go back to the score, or vice versa. It's all up to you. The main thing is taking those big movements and getting used to that with a basic strum pattern. That's the challenge, like I mentioned earlier, with this particular lesson. You know, it seems very straight and very slow in terms of the rhythm, but when you put those chords in there and you move in those designations from the score, that's where the challenge comes in. And another note about the switching of the chords. On the end of 4 is where you want to lift your hand off. So before you get ready to change to the next new chord, your left hand's going to lift. So that up strum that you get on the end of 4 is where your left hand moves to the next chord, wherever that is in the score. Whether it's going from, C minor 7 to the G minor 7. When you play that particular pair, and there's something too, you can isolate before you do the score. Take the chords out of the score, hang out with those for a while. 2, 3, 4, lift. 2, 3, 4, lift. So I'm going between the C minor 7 and the G minor 7 as my pair. And I can start with the G minor 7 chord first, move down to the C minor 7. So it's a good time to kind of discuss like how to practice these things, right? Rather than just jumping into the score, which is what we did. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse or whatever. The thing is that if you're running into difficulties in the score and trying to play it, which you should definitely try these things out before you do the actual score. Long story long, okay? So any kind of pairing isolated wise is fantastic. Like I said, like chords, you can do different chords, the major 7 to the minor 7. Wherever you want to go that feels challenging, that's the place you want to start, okay? So if you try to play through this chord chart and it's difficult and you're having a hard time with it, take these little advisements under advisement. Okay? Going back to lift technique, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, lift. And you'll get that open string sound in there. If you play this particular pairing quickly, like the C minor 7 to G minor 7, barely perceptible that you have that lift and you're hitting those open strings. It's kind of quick. And the faster the tempo goes, the more indecipherable that little open string sound right there is. Oh, so sliding is definitely cool. So anyway, there's all kinds of stuff that happens when you're practicing these things too, which is cool. So like a quote unquote mistake may actually sound pretty cool and you go, hey, that's kind of cool. I'll hang with that for a little bit. And then you're into a whole other territory of taking what you learn from this type of thing in this lesson and applying it musically, okay? So there's guardrails with getting used to the strum pattern and then the chords, and as you go through and you play, you may find yourself doing these inadvertent mistakes, which really turn into be kind of cool spots depending on how relaxed you are with going through the material. So always have that in mind where as you play through these things, you may have a moment when you're playing through something that sounds really cool. So keep that, because that becomes part of sort of applying what you're learning from something like this video and then making music out of it. So which is always the end game. So it's just something that you could take and just run with and do whatever you want. And if you're working on your own songs, or if you're figuring out a song, if you're trying to like listen to a tune and get something out of it where you're trying to sort of work on a moment that sounds like you can't figure it out, but in practice when you were going through a certain thing like this particular installment of this strum patterns video, you might hit something that go, oh, that sounds like that part of that song that I was working on. And then just because you sort of made this mistake in practicing this particular lesson with all the specific information and you do a little glitch, you go, hey, wait, that might be that part of that song. I think that's what it is. And then you go back to it and sure enough it is, or it's close or it's not. Those are the fun parts of taking what's here and applying them into your playing. So you may have those little moments of surprise where you didn't mean to do something, but you did it anyway, and then that became something that you solved, for your ear training, figuring out a part of a tune. Or if you're writing something and you want to have a little moment like, oh yeah, that little mistake I made when playing through that, strum patterns and rhythms video thing. When I went into that, I had that little mistake in there when I was practicing it, but now I can use that moment in my song. So, or like I mentioned earlier, figuring out a song that was like a moment that was difficult to get, where you couldn't quite hear what it was, but that little mistake kind of cued something. So that's really the nice byproduct of doing these kinds of lessons, is that when you play through them on your own and you start manipulating the information a bit, from what it specifically is to something different, that's the transformative part of learning stuff, through a channel like this one or any other channel on YouTube. So that's my end hope with this particular lesson, is that you can take the information and really do something cool with it. From playing it down specifically, where now you can move from position to position on your guitar with ease and keeping everything slow. That's why this tempo is at 60. So if that feels quick, bring it on down, slow it down. You can use the play speed settings on YouTube to do that, and then you can just take the chord chart and read through it with your metronome and then play with the metronome, play without the metronome, put it back on to check your tempo, make sure you're not speeding up or slowing down, things like that. And then of course, any kind of mistake that you get, don't get too hung up on the idea of a mistake. You may actually like the sound you get from those mistakes. That's really the part of playing an instrument that's really exciting. If you take the pressure off and just play, that's something that is really the main end goal to anything you learn on not just my channel, but any channel. And if you're taking lessons with somebody, if you're studying with a teacher, bring this into your lesson if you want to, if you're having a difficult time, or just continue to play back through this lesson to work on those little moments where it's like, oh, that's, I didn't care for that too much. So that's the end of this particular installment. Part 3 is coming next week, and this is the first video of the new year, 2023. So have yourself a great time with this information. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you in the next video. And if you like this video, of course, feel free to like and subscribe. The numbers here are going up on the channel. I'm very thrilled about that. Welcome to everyone that is here, and my hope is that this material helps you out in any shape or form. And thanks again so much for being part of the channel. We'll talk to you next time.